Have some wonderful guests that you all get a chance to ask some questions to. So if there's a microphone out there, somebody that's running a microphone, we're going to try to make this as engaging and as possible, so we're not just talking at you, but you can ask questions all the way throughout. There's some biographical information in your booklet, so I'm not going to go too much into that, but I am going to get a lot of panelists to introduce themselves very, very briefly so we can get started. So I'll just pass it to my left, Mr. Heyward, and then we'll go all the way down.
Hey, this thing going? Okay. All right. Good afternoon. I'm James Heyward, founder and a Duke alum too, and I'm the principal of Heyward CPA, PLLC, here in the Bull City, and everything else is in your bulletin.
Hi everyone, my name is Nisha Evans. I am the founder and CEO of Lennox & Gray Incorporated. Started the company last year, completed our first acquisition for a commercial property in downtown Durham, February of this year, and really excited about the next steps for the company.
Hello everyone, my name is Tiffany Elder. I am an incremental developer and licensed general contractor here in Durham, also owner of Paradigm Properties, a boutique brokerage firm focused on teaching individuals how to own investment property.
And I am Kezia Godwin, the owner and creator of Kate's Corner, a drop-in child care center that's coming in spring of 2020 on the American Tobacco campus.
Perfect. So thank you all for being here and taking time out of your day to engage with our audience as well. I'm going to ask a question or two just to get the conversation going, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience and have some interactive conversations very early on so we can get your questions in all throughout and not just at the end. And for the panelists, the questions I'll ask, feel free to jump in whatever and answer as you feel free. The first question I'll ask is, how has been your experience with capital? Have you raised capital? Tell us a story about what capital means to you and your firm. Anyone?
Are we starting?
We'll go first, Nish.
Okay, so as I mentioned, I started Lennox & Gray last year, and really just the vision for me was learning how to buy it and build it. I was very intentional in terms of just letting my network know that I was making a career transition. I actually came from 13 years of a banking, commercial as well as community banking background, and so really I was just trying to figure out, how do you get started? Very attracted, to both the commercial as well as, construction as well as the real estate side of things. And so it just so happens I joined as a project manager with a local construction company, CT Wilson, that focuses on commercial renovations as well as building, and then landed my first deal. And so the purchase was for 112 West Main Street, which is located in downtown Durham. And really that process was me literally begging the sellers to give me a chance to get the deal done. And so for me, my network, I came from a venture capital background, and so really it was just starting to ask individuals who might be interested in purchasing a building with me. And so from there, you get your no's, you get a couple of yeses, but really it's just the handoff. And so I tell people my deal, I actually had 90 days to raise $2.5 million. And really just going through that process. The first 45 days was, of course, looking at middle-aged, white men and asking them for an opportunity to partner with me. And so these are people who've never done a business transaction with me. Quite honestly, a lot of people thought that it was a really small deal. And so really it was just a whirlwind, trying to figure out how to go through from start to finish purchasing a building, but secondly, building or raising, the full capital. So that was my process.
Excellent, thank you.
So this has been my first venture as an entrepreneur altogether. I have managed mainly other people's money and the well-being of other people's children under other people's policies. So capital was something that I knew, only being a part of a youngest of 8 and all of them being entrepreneurs, is that you will not live, or this will not live, without 18-month operation costs, et cetera, et cetera. You can't forget anything and you can't have any surprises. So capital has been my focus. I'm still in my race currently. So I eat, breathe, and all the things concerning capital. But what I understood is that there was a way to get to capital, not just by one or two means, but by being able to bring partnerships in with like-minded, focuses, and being able to have more people who are interested in making a impact in the community and that would come to the table, even though I'm, new at being an entrepreneur, but with my experience in early childhood.
In my experience, real estate is very capital intensive. I've used a mix of commercial funding in the beginning, used more residential funding where I could if the project, the residential development project called for it. Also used private funding. I'll tell a quick story about Harrington Bank, which was a local smaller bank here, and I always encourage new entrepreneurs to consider working with smaller local banks in addition to any other funding sources you're looking at. But they were financing all of my urban development projects, and then I get a call from Jim one day saying, "Hey Tiff, you've done a great job, just need to let you know we're balancing our portfolio and we can no longer make this type of loan to you or anyone else." So for a real estate developer who was depending on that for their bread and butter, that came to a screeching halt, and I went to talk to about a half dozen other banks, and this was going into the recession, so they were not lending those funds either. So I had to get creative on that, and that's where private lending came in and leveraging self-directed IRAs and some other creative avenues. So yeah, I've used wherever I could get it over the years.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, well, let me see. I'm a serial entrepreneur, so I have to figure out which business I'm going to talk about first. But initially, I'll talk about now being in professional services has not required a lot of capital in the beginning because you are the product. So, I started in my home. Well, I started while I was still working, but I started in my home, so I didn't really need as much capital. And the capital that I did, I was able to obtain, I was actually able to reinvest in the company to be able to grow to a certain point. It's more so that I'm at the point now where I need capital, more to deal with cash flow issues in this business. And that, I guess we'll get into, is really challenging because it's soft money. Unlike real estate, there's at least a building attached to it. Banks feel like they could get it, but when you soft money, it's a whole. Usually they give you money after you got money, so you have to rely on, if you can, which is a challenge, family, friends, people you meet to do things. Be smart with your credit cards. As I heard, something's going to go wrong. So, it's just being prepared for it and be able to weather it. So, but capital, it's some of my clients I see, it's really rough. I've seen some really great companies and they're doing well top line, but they may have had one mishap or something, can't get any money, whether it be payroll taxes or something, can't get any money to suffice, and they can't continue. So it's
Yeah. I'll ask one more question, and then we'll open it up to the audiences to start to ask some questions back and forth to our panelists. You talked about, broadly speaking, your engagement with capital so far. Can you give me an example where either race or gender, you've had an experience or something has happened, you say, whoa, wait a minute, I need to think about capital as it relates to race or gender, and input that into my formula for how I interact with capital?
Don't everybody speak at once. Anyone? Well, all right, I'll warm it up. Okay. So, I think, and it's something I explore on the podcast I do, I'm black, the relationship with money is challenging. So I find that often, a lot of these businesses and startups, they are getting money from their families. You can read magazines all you want. A lot of them are getting money from their families. And that's a challenge in the culture. It's a challenge, And I think that on that level it faces because now you kind of, undercapitalized trying to make things happen. Even if you get something, it might be $1,000 and they calling you every day, seeing how the business is going, stuff like that. And then when you go institutional, in that same relationship, I don't know if it's a lot of trust. I'm speaking for myself. I'm not going to speak. But because I started when I was young. I was like 19, 20 years old. And I really didn't know what a bank does. In fact, I told a banker this year, I said, people don't really know what you do. I said, charging SF charges and all this other stuff. So understanding how to obtain capital is not well known in the community. And I think people are hesitant to put their ideas out and get shot down. I think it's, we could go into a whole cultural, sociological thing about it, but and I'm speaking some from clients as well. You could tell it's like, hey, you need to get private money. And it's just, there's nothing happening. So I believe it's cultural. Me personally, as somebody, but I mean, not get, as I said, I do not need as much capital as these young ladies do. So it's a little bit different for me.
I think the race piece for me, coming into Durham, being born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio, where it was very more evident where you belonged and where you should be. Coming into Durham was a huge game changer for me as far as the acceptance of who I was in trying to do the work in equity in education. So I feel like the community welcomed what I was doing. I think that the financial institutions it didn't matter that much to them. And I've run up against that. So I've had some offers on the table that are not offers. I think that was mentioned earlier, good capital and bad capital, and knowing how to stand in a place and not be desperate to go after the bad capital, knowing that that's not something they would offer the next person. And it didn't matter that I had for 30 years ran a kindercare education, 7 centers in one city, was net positive for what it did. None of those things mattered. It mattered to kindercare. They made the money, and I love that company. It's nothing against them, but for people to see what you can do, I think I would have had some different outcomes to this point if I wasn't me. I am unapologetically Black at every table I sit at. I believe that it's important to figure out how to create your own tables so that you can give opportunity. But the overall acceptance into the community, I think, has been exceptional here in Durham.
Awesome. Any other stabs at that?
Well, I mean, with my deal, it was a very unique story that actually came about kind of halfway through the fundraising process, and found out that I was actually going to be the 3rd generation Black owner of my building. And so beautiful couple that owned it, sold it to Empress Development, who of course then sold it to me. And they were very intentional. If you ever talk to Elaine or Elaine Curry or Don Page, they'll tell you we were very intentional about it. But I also caught them at the last minute, right? So I remember it to this day, I called them on a Friday and was just like, hey, I don't have any money, but I really want to buy your building. I'm like, who is this on my phone? And so, I told them I really felt confident that I could get the deal done, and I just asked for them to give me a chance. They were actually in the process of signing a deal, and so they said, we'll give it some time and we'll think about it. And literally, I said, well, that's enough time to keep bugging them. And so I called them on Saturday, called them on Sunday, I was like, just give me a chance. And so on Monday, we ended up, signing the contract, and from there, the clock is ticking. And like I said, heads down, really just asking my community, in terms of people who are interested, building relationships with commercial lenders, really trying to learn on the fly, expectations in terms of the underwriting review. And from there, like I said, found out I was 3rd generation Black owner. And so I think in terms of pitching, yes, that was utilized, but really I had to fill out, the individual that I was pitching to. And so once again, again, just time being of the essence, really this was about making sure that I was pitching the true economics, of the deal. But I think that this was kind of an added bonus, for those who were receptive. But once again, it really just depended on who I was speaking to.
Yeah.
And I think our experience might be a little different because it's in the real estate realm. So there's an underlying asset, and if the numbers make sense, it's a little bit easier to identify financing as opposed to a purely entrepreneurial venture that isn't tied to assets.
Yeah, thank you. Well, often in my panels, and the audience sits there patiently and never gets a chance to ask a question, so I wanted to make sure we opened up early enough so that all your wonderful questions get answered. Is there a question so far for our wonderful panelists? None so far. There we are.
All right. My question would be to the two real estate ladies, because obviously I'm in that space, and I'm doing my own multifamily deal right now, and I'm kind of talked about it a few times throughout the conference. I'm using securities regulations CF to do the crowdfunding. And you said your deal was $2.5 million. That was all equity deal, or was that your full debt stack on equity and debt?
Equity and debt.
And equity. Okay.
Thank you. That was easy. That was an easy enough answer. We'll take another one.
So today we've been hearing a lot from the money and sources. As entrepreneurs, what do you need? What do you think is the best thing that you all need? I have my opinion, but what do you all, from your perspective, what's the best thing that you need to be able to move you forward?
So I'll start first. There are two things that I've identified. So my deal moved very fast, and right now I've been intentional about asking my network for one, is there an interim role or partnership opportunity in order for me to spend more time solely focusing on how to structure deals and having a more in-depth understanding of what capital resources are available. So for my deal, I dealt with hard money lending. I dealt with, my own personal lines of credit, of course, the equity portion of it, and then understanding commercial lending, but I'm also just curious about more of the private equity side and just getting into more, governmental grants and really just exploring all of that. But it's really hard because I found something that aligns, with real estate as far as the commercial, construction, but it definitely takes away the time for me to be dedicated. So one is interim opportunities to be able to focus on that. And then secondly, access to bridge financing, just because I'm only playing currently in the Durham market and it moves so fast that if I could have some type of interim, financing, that would help me to then be able to go and create the vision, for the property, line up my subcontractors and really to execute. So those are the two things that I've been asking for.
Yeah.
And for me, one of my strongest passions is increasing ownership within the community. I'm sure all of you are aware that Durham is changing quite a bit. I'm from South Side of Chicago, so I've seen changes there, and seeing that here and seeing how quickly it's moving is a little bit disenchanting at times. So one of my goals is to try to help encourage the desire and the ability for ownership. And one of the changes to zoning, which was a text change to zoning that City Council in Durham just passed, expanding housing choices, is going to increase density within the urban core and create opportunities for owners who, let's say grandma has a house on a large underutilized lot. This will create an opportunity to potentially subdivide, sell the lot, put some cash in her pocket, or build an accessory dwelling unit on this large home that she doesn't need, but she can move into the accessory dwelling unit and rent out the home and create additional cash flow for herself so that she can stay in the community and not be priced out as taxes, et cetera, go up. So I need assistance around thinking about how to make this work on a larger scale within the community, as well as finding financing options for the average everyday person who doesn't have access necessarily to commercial financing and construction, so that we can get these projects on the ground for these folks and encourage stable ownership and maintain and ideally increase ownership within the community.
For me, time is of the essence, but of a $550,000 raise, I'm down to the last $90K that's needed to close the deal. But what is important after that $90K is partnerships in the community with pre-sale dollars for companies to commit to buying packages each month for their employees for the drop-in option for them to be able to have care in the last minute necessities. So my need is that to close the deal, but also to have commitments that secure my business for operations for, the years that I'll be there.
Thank you.
Well, I need cash. I need a line of credit. I mean, let's put it this way. It would help me with some of the moves I'm making right now to have a line of credit to assist in the marketing that we're doing. And since we're opening another location this year, it would help with staffing and things like that. But a line of credit would be the best thing especially because of the cash flow variation in my line of business. So that's really when it gets tough. Like for instance, okay, this is November, like December and January, it gets pretty cold. And so we had to but then February through April, we on fire. So that's something we're trying to work on right now.
Yeah, really great question. I have another question for you that's maybe somewhat related. We've been talking about capital and the role of capital in your ventures. Can you give an example? You can use capital, but what has been the most important thing or some of the most important things to you in becoming and growing as an entrepreneur?
Well, the reason why I left KinderCare is because their model takes care of children who can afford to be there. I knew that the work around equity in education and implicit bias training for our teachers to change the projection of education was important. And people kind of tend to forget that the education system was not created with us in mind. So my passion is to be able to bring the equity into education, but also marry education with corporate funding so that we're not always reliant on the government to come through with the vouchers and different things like that. So I was intentional when I came into Durham to find out what it is that Durham needed. We did a lot of polling. We did a lot of numbers of what is the best needed, and then how do we get there. So it's important to me because I see the next generation. We talk so much about all the things that we talked about this session and tech and the development. It starts when they're little. I think the young lady kind of just hemmed that up today by saying that her mother challenged her at 3 to give her information and give her direction, and they are sponges at that age. So we all sit here because a teacher or someone invested in us in a meaningful way. I want to be able to create that opportunity for all of our children coming behind us to be able to love school and be welcome in school, especially our African American boys who are expelled 10 times greater than any group of children and greater than any middle schoolers in preschool. We're talking about preschool age children. So that's my passion, to be able to change that dynamic.
Thank you.
I think for me, what's been most helpful, I've been in business since 2003. So, and it's been a bit of a circuitous route in real estate. You have general contracting, you have brokerage, you have development. So it's a lot. So hats change frequently. And I remember going into the recession, being a licensed general contractor here in the area and just seeing construction company after construction company close and shut their doors. And I had to halt, and I think what's benefited my business or businesses has been being willing to take a step back in order to take 2 forward and not just assume that I'd been in business for a certain length of time and things were supposed to be a certain way. Like in construction, I had to completely change my business model and cut all the fat and get rid of as much overhead as possible so that I could, ride that wave through and still come out on the other end. So I think being willing to be nimble and being willing to humble yourself and change things when they're not the way that you expect them to be has been really helpful.
I would say kind of for me twofold. One has been, inspiration. I named my company after my two sons. So Ellery Lennox and Zolan Gray, that 5 and 7-year-olds that said, hey, Mom, we want to be engineers. And I was like, hey, what am I going to actually start to build that could both inspire you, but also has that legacy component to it. But I was quickly told that their mission is to become Pokemon trainers. So I don't think, I don't know how long this will last. But, they were definitely the inspiration, wanting to see the physical manifestation of the hard work that I was putting in. So, being in corporate for over 13 years and now actually having a creative outlet, through construction and development has also been great. And then I also really like to share credit with my technical team. And so, everyone from my accountant, to my attorneys, I feel like very fortunate and very grateful because, yes, we're about business, always, but at the end of the day, they do provide mentorship, which has really been great. And I know that could easily be, billable hours, but it's just been great to catch lunch, grab coffee with them and just to talk through, different things and how to mature, as a businesswoman. And so that's been I'm very fortunate in that case.
Okay, well, I was born into it. I literally, my first business was over here DJing parties and actually getting a check for it. And from there, I've had a marketing promotion company, a record store, event management company, which I still kind of got on. And then I bought a house with my then wife, and I said, I got to do something a little stable. So got a CPA license. My father's an accountant, and I always worked for him. And he always told me, go get a CPA license. So while I was running my store, I started enjoying doing the books more than running the store, and so I was like, the accountant's in me. And when I started out, of course, I'm going to work from the house, just make my money, I'll be good. But that's not me. Once I hired my first employees, and then I got an office space, and now, almost 10 years later, I have different goals. And one of my things is I believe in small business. That's the focus of my practice, the small business. And, and I mean people that, they came up with an idea and did it. I know the tech world is there. That's the exciting place to talk about starting a business. But, there's people have great ideas, and I believe in it. And even now, one of my goals is to basically become an employer. That's what I want to do. A lot of talk right here between diversity and things like that. My answer to a lot of it, especially when we talk about we need more CPA partners. I'm like, well, you need more black-owned CPA firms, and then you have more black CPA partners. And I believe that in every industry. And so last week or so, I said, I'm going to challenge myself to be involved with or help, which like my clients, I don't know, 100 black-owned enterprises that stand up on their own. We'll start with 10. And that's kind of what drives me, and it also drives me to keep getting better in what I'm doing, because I feel as though just in this industry of accounting, it's white. It's white. Seriously. So there's an opportunity because of how we do leverage technology and do things a little bit different, and I've been blessed enough to be able to have great people that work with me that allow me to float around and do things like this while work is still being done. I feel like that's a great opportunity to teach people. I've had interns come from Central. I've had interns, NC State, my black accountant students. Have a great one right now. He's getting ready to finish grad school, so I try to replace him. But it's something that it really is what drives me. I love entrepreneurship. It's certainly not the money. I'll tell you that much. It's not that. So, but I just feel like I could make an impact in both with people in the accounting industry and then entrepreneurs such as these that I meet that, help educate them and help them be successful. So that's why I do it.
Thank you. We'll take another question from the audience. I see a few there.
Yeah. Hi, Aaron Sanchez-Guerra, cover real estate and business for the News and Observer and the Herald Sun. I wanted to ask the panel broadly what local journalism, how it could better serve the community, as in when it comes to growth, development, and capital, what should we be covering, and in what way?
This area, Raleigh-Durham's changing a lot. I believe that the media does what it can with the information that it's given. I think highlighting some of the cool things that are happening in the Triangle, projects that are, that can inspire more people to get into it, and a broader swath of people to get into real estate overall could be helpful, and not make it seem so smoke and mirrors and so intangible. Covering from both sides of the story, things like expanding housing choices that's coming down the pipeline, and maybe not so much focusing on the, for lack of a better word, the drama in the background, but focusing on what of the, some of the benefits of those things and how everyday people can use those things to benefit themselves and to benefit their families. I know that that's maybe not the more exciting piece, but that's the piece that's really meaningful that can make a huge change in the community. Just a couple ideas.
I think storytelling is essential. I mean, we've heard it in the thread of these conversations. It puts a real person who's had a real struggle, that has gone through something and then prospered. It definitely gives a incentive or an initiative for those who are trying to seek a business opportunity, and they're seeing that it's being done. And I think when you tell stories, you tell truths, and that takes away the creativity that comes out of the media sometimes that is not around the truth. So it allows a true story to be told in the words of the person who is going through the actual struggle, or et cetera. Yeah.
Oh, I'll just add, I just want to make sure the media doesn't reflect Durham being something totally different than it has been. And it's a lot of history, a lot of historic things. As you mentioned, you the third, black owner of a building. Those things don't come out that much.
Right.
In the way, the trajectory that we're on in this town, I've been here long enough to see, people from Raleigh never come here, because they thought it was like a war zone or something. And now, downtown was empty. I had my store on Chapel Hill Street, that was on the West End. And now it's kind of looking like, okay, people are here, but, yeah, I don't know, is it Durham? It's Durham. But, and I think the media can play a part in that. And, now that it's cool to go to Durham, let's not make it be the other, because it's cool to go to Durham. And these ladies have wonderful stories that should be highlighted. And, that's as a resident. I'm just saying that as a resident.
Any other takes for that question? And then I saw a couple hands go up.
So the Triangle likes to tout itself as kind of this enclave of entrepreneurship, and there's a lot of, government efforts to that, private efforts to that. Can you talk a little bit about some of the good things you've seen, and whether you feel like you have access to those resources, or some negative experiences you might have had with kind of the incubators or startups or government programs that we hear so much about in the Triangle?
I'll speak to my experience. The partnerships are a big part of why I'm where I'm at within a year of being here in Durham. But the Goodman family, who owns the American Tobacco campus, partnered with me. They were just a group of people who saw the need, but also let the action meet their words, that they wanted to be able to provide and create an ecosystem for downtown, for all children, all families, et cetera. And so I will say that I feel like I benefited. There are many conversations that I've sat in and had because I'm not tech-based that I felt like I didn't fit in. And my argument is always, well, you need to be educated to do tech. So why am I not in these conversations? But that's been my experience. And I feel like there's a lot of effort around knowing how to get to capital. I think it was really focused on a few weeks ago when what we understood is that we go to the same pools of money over and over and over again. So being able to be creative in partnerships and finding people who really want to do the work has been very, very good to me.
Other takes?
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, well, I agree with you. Everything seems to be focused on tech, and everybody's not trying to develop an app, and everybody is not doing bioscience. It's other things, and when the term venture capital is used, it kind of, you attach it to technology, and because that's the thing. So I personally, I haven't participated in a lot of, I know people that have, but for what I didn't really need it, but some of my other ventures, they didn't fit. It just feels like it doesn't fit. It feels like there's a disconnect at times. Yeah. So, and I think part of that is just growth. And, as more businesses here, people are fine, or more private people have money that are willing to put it into other things. Restaurants do good now, couldn't get that 20 years ago. So, yeah.
But I want to say something about that because I'm not tech. I'm not against tech. Tech is definitely the way of education for me. So tech ed is a real thing, and we're creating that space in Kate's Corner to make sure that there is those outlets for our children to catch up, and they say to close the opportunity gap in education as well as the digital gap. So. But what I will say is that our investors are different. They're looking long term. They want to be invested in it. It's a different type. They're not looking for the exit. They want to be able to improve their communities, et cetera.
Yeah, and I think I'll try to answer your question a little bit from my experience as well. So being the president of the Black Chamber of Commerce, I'm often talking to private and governmental agencies about how to build the best ecosystem for entrepreneurship in general, right? And I think the good thing is that these conversations are being had right now, right? I think not just nationally, but here in Durham, we're having a lot of conversations about what that means and what role government and the private sector can play in creating the best ecosystem. I think that there's still a gap there because I think that how we understand how to create that best ecosystem, there's some gap there between what we think some solutions are and where some solutions are already on the table. And I think that a lot of that has to do with how we as a town look at economic development and how we grow, right? Where capital is naturally looking for. And I think that we're not applying those principles broadly across the board, right? So that's why we hear about life sciences and tech. And not about other things that are viable entrepreneurial ventures. So I think that there's a gap there, but I'm excited that we're starting to have these conversations. But I do agree that we are a tech town, but we're a young tech town. I know that there's some people in the audience who have a lot of experience from their ventures or from their leadership that can also add some color to that. So, but I wanted to at least add that for your question. Thank you. I saw a couple hands jump up, so yes.
So I have two questions. The first from Mr. Heyward. I know oftentimes entrepreneurs say, well, I want to be my own boss. I want to be the person who makes the decisions, who's responsible for them however they go. Mm-hmm. But you said you're not in it for the money, so my question is, what are you in it for? And then I'm asking if you'd please be more precise about the changes that you hoped for in Durham and what you actually see on the ground. Then for the entrepreneur who recently purchased the downtown property from 2 Black owners, what purpose do or will you put the building to? And is this like the first piece of, a larger real estate portfolio you plan to develop? Or, do you have tenants in the building? Is that the plan? Like, what's the ideal scenario for you on the short term and the long term?
You want to go? I'll go first.
Okay.
Fine. Okay. Yeah, I don't do it for what I'm saying purely, when I say that, use that term, I don't do it for the money. It's because my experience in entrepreneurship is that, especially early, there won't be any money. And when you can work very hard and end up paying everybody else and go home and eat a bologna sandwich. And you may have made like 30 grand that week, something like that. So what's gonna make you come back on Monday? So it's something, for me, it's a lifestyle, to be honest with you. Like, I can't work for anybody. I mean, I'd be good till the first paycheck, then, my show. I mean, I've been out too long. I mean, I would be the worst. Like, I'm telling you, like, I don't care how high the job was, but I just feel like in my circumstance, I'm able to do other things by having a business, and some of that is personally take care of my own personal health, and some of it is being there. I mean, I don't have any children, except a beagle, but and provide opportunities, and I can just do so much that it's empowering, and there are other businesses I'm going to have. So that's I'm all in. I'm ridiculous, but that's that's kind of why I do it. But believe me, I like money, but it doesn't motivate me. That's the proper way to state that. In terms of the changes in Durham, I mean, hey, look, it's and I've seen it because I've served on boards like in the 90s. I was on the Convention and Visitors Bureau. I was in a lot of these workshops where a lot of these neighborhoods were conceptualized. And to turn around and read a stat that there were no houses under 300,000 in Durham, I was like, whoa. Aside from looking at my house and saying, well, it might be time to go. It's like the people that have been here. One of the things that when I came to school here and I stayed here was the people. And the sense of people in Durham. This was back before all the pretty buildings were here, I like the people. And one of my colleagues, he's actually a realtor and a promoter, we had this conversation. It's like, we can't let the faces get missing. I mean, there's tons of bars downtown. That wasn't there 5 years ago, but the complexion of the town is not reflected. Demographically, we're supposed to be 40%, black anyway, probably 60% minority, close to it. And I just don't want to see that. I think we have an opportunity. Some of it's just our participation in what's there. Mm-hmm. We have an opportunity to not let it get, washed away, gone with this. And I think that the participation by us adds an extra dimension. Even like with the realtor, you guys were going for financing, and people, it's different. They know we're part of the city. It's not. We're not at odds. And I think there's an opportunity for that. But I can see where media or the way people talk can make it, kind of like squash the past or be like, it's not like that anymore. And I don't want to see that when the city prospers. That's me. I'm unapologetically black too. Like, why would, it starts prospering and now we want to act like it's not 40-something% black. I'm not with that. So that's my story.
Thank you for the question. So the goal, really, this was just the first, acquisition, and so there's no development or redevelopment opportunities, and so I stepped into a cash flowing, scenario, and so there are 3 tenants. Luna, which is a South American restaurant. My second tenant is Morningstar Law Firm, and then my third tenant is Empowered Dance Studio. So I definitely take pride in the fact that I am the landlord of 3 local, businesses. They're all very successful, and 2 out of the 3 are, local startups that have been around now for almost 5 years. And so that's a very, rare situation. And so there's really nothing that needs to be, done, to the property. Obviously, there's some value add in terms of I have an unfinished basement, looking at some other options in terms of being able to build up, with the property. And so that's pretty much it. And then, yes, this is definitely the first deal of hopefully many. I'm actually right now trying to navigate my first redevelopment project. And so, as I mentioned, this was always going to be a passion in terms of having a creative outlet. And so with this particular location, I'm really trying to do 2 things. One is get over the 10,000 square foot hump. And so my first deal, like I said, surprisingly, a lot of investors said this is really small, which I was like, hey, it's big to me, but it's my first deal, so of course it's big. But getting over the 10,000 square foot hump, and then, like I said, really just navigating a true deal now as far as acquisition, renovation, and then getting new tenants for the next deal. Thank you.
Sure.
Hi. Ooh, that's a lot louder than I thought. So my question actually touches on a couple of things that were already mentioned, including something that you said, Mr. Heyward. So, yeah. So Durham has a very rich history, particularly with Black businesses. We know this. There's a whole exhibit outside by the coffee that will show you that. I was at a meeting for the Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People a couple weeks ago, and a developer there mentioned that now when you see pictures of the skyline, the North Carolina Mutual building isn't always included in it. It's kind of like this rebranding of Durham that's happening. I shared with one of the breakout groups earlier this morning that I was so glad Maynard was being shown this afternoon or this evening because he was committed to, in the expansion of Atlanta's airport, that 20 to 25% of those contracts were going to Black businesses, period. Earlier today, Mayor Schul mentioned that there's going to be a $300,000 investment in minority and women-owned businesses and advocacy for them, but we know that typically with those programs like affirmative action, the group that benefits most is usually white women. No shade, but that's the facts. So my question to you all, whoever wants to answer, is are you optimistic about the city of Durham being invested in this continuing to be a place for the cultivation and the success of Black businesses?
So we're all familiar with the history of Durham, I'm sure, and we're going to have to do it for ourselves and go back to what Durham was and what made Durham what it was. We're going to have to find ways. I'm working with a group, and I see a couple members here of the collective in the back, and it's a group of Black real estate professionals, appraisers, lenders, surveyors, housing providers, subcontractors and general contractors, and everyone else who supports the life cycle of real estate. And we have come together with the goal of collective resourcing, with the goal of sharing knowledge and information, and with the goal of creating a safe space where everything that you would need in order to do your development deal is right here in the room. You don't have to wonder where to go. If you have questions, that's where you can go to start figuring it out. And I believe we're going to need more of that because that's what Durham was. When I first moved here, I'm a Carolina grad girl. I know I'm in Duke territory here, but yay, Ken and Flagler. When I first moved here, I heard that story, and I heard, you could be born in Durham in a Black hospital. You could go to a Black school. You could, have a Black employer. You could pretty much have your entire life cycle within the Black community, and you die and be buried, by a Black funeral home. And we've lost a lot of that along the way. And I think what will keep us from moving forward is assuming that someone else is going to come and do it for us. Yeah. We can have allies, we can have partners, but we have to be willing to take the lead and do that for ourselves and find ways to do that for ourselves and create win-wins with those allies and those partners.
Absolutely. I think asking, putting it in perspective, historically, there wasn't a lot of asking of permission. There was doing. And that collaboration came from within the communities versus depending on, and forgive me but I always wonder why we sit around waiting for a policy or a law to change that's in favor. I mean, we've been here for a long time and that has not been the case. We can definitely do our work to impact change, but I think that the answers, like many when you're trying to evolve yourself, are within. and collaborating within and finding lenders and investors and people who have made it. That's where you find those answers. And so I'm not to be crass, I don't mind or know what the policy or what the objective is of the local government, but nor do I care as much as I care about finding those like-minded people to get the vision completed. It definitely will affect us, but I think it affects us more because we give it more power than we should.
Oh,
Any other?
well, since I made the comment, well, just to tell, I totally agree, 100%, right there. My take on it is, if we, as Black-owned businesses, continue to build world-class businesses, that those ecosystems will start developing on their own, and I believe that this is a great city for happening. I think because first of all, we have a lot of brilliant people in this town. Some of them so brilliant they never get started, but they're brilliant, and I think it's executing and doing these things and having these conversations, and worried about the government. I mean, I think it's because it's the business I'm in, but I just got Hub certified, but I did it more so primarily so I could get clients that are trying to be Hub certified as clients. It's not a lot of room for me to get a contract. I may figure one out, but I just believe that the entrepreneurial community and the resources we do have, I think things could be great, but we can't sit back and just let the city happen. Because if it does, then what I spoke to before, I mean, we won't be around. Like it'll, and then people will start getting upset, and then we'll, look for a policy change to try to force, change. But I think the opportunity is here, and I do feel good about it. Feel comfortable.
Accountability is huge.
Yeah.
That's the biggest part of it. I mean, he's going to say a lot of things. A lot of people say a whole lot of things. But the accountability part is our responsibility. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to bring this much money in for minorities, we make note, great. Minority women are going to be present downtown, great. When it doesn't happen, what happens? What do we say? How do we get together and say, hey, you said that you were going to do this, and now it's voting time, and you didn't show up and you didn't do the things you said you were going to do, then the only way we change that dynamic is the level of accountability. Money going out the door when it's told that it's going to minorities, to Ford foundations and things like that, is to paint a picture so they can continue to get money from Ford foundations, et cetera. If we don't hold them accountable, then the measure of what they're giving them could be true or not true. But if they say, we did this, and you have a group of entrepreneurs standing up and saying, no, you didn't, that's harder to get away with. And so I think the level of accountability is huge for us to really start taking participation in.
Yeah, and I'll take a stab at answering your question also. I think, in my opinion, it's probably a little bit left and right, but hopefully you'll take something from it, right? I've been in Durham for more than 20 years now. Came here to go to school, undergrad, and like most of you have heard, the city has changed a lot, right? For more than 10 years now, I've been working with the Black Chamber of Commerce, primarily because very, very committed to figuring out how this Black Wall Street happened and how to figure out how to recreate that, right? And in my first couple of years at the Black Chamber of Commerce, we did a lot of work with entrepreneurs and their businesses, right? And we're talking about the role of government, the role of institutions, and so on and so forth. I don't think I understood it then, but after about 8 years or so and doing an impact analysis, maybe there were 200 or 300 businesses that we served and we did really, really well with, right? But the impact wasn't there, right? The broader impact of trying to recreate this ecosystem, if you will, that served hundreds and thousands of entrepreneurs and businesses, it wasn't there in the way that we knew it had to be there, right? And so we started thinking about our work a little bit differently, right? How do you create that? And through that process, we learned a lot. Concurrently, my wife had started a racial equity company, and I started helping her with her company and learning more about racism and how to assess topics on a broad spectrum, right? I started to understand the difference between an individual analysis, an institutional analysis, and a systemic analysis, right? And in that, I started to strengthen our collaborations with government, local city government and county government, as a function of trying to build this ecosystem, right? And what I can tell you is that that's very, very, very important, right? And I believe right now we are very, very close to getting somewhere, but there's a whole group of people, almost all of us, right, black, white, that have been socialized in this country to not believe in a black entrepreneur, to not believe in a black person, to not believe that black people have the ability, social network, whatever, to execute these projects, right? So what I found is that while we're exploring these topics in rooms like this, we really haven't figured out how to operationalize, how to put that to work, right? As a part of the last 2 budget cycles for both the city and the county, I've been involved and made private, semi-public, private pitches to our city and our county to fund organizations that are interested in building these black business ecosystems, and there are a couple that have done that work over the years, and those efforts have been heard, but they have not been regarded or operationalized, right? And so I think that the question we have to ask ourselves, and then our friend here asked about the media and so on and so forth, as we're being socialized beyond being socialized to think a certain way or to do a certain thing, we have to look for examples and look for how do we build pipelines of entrepreneurs, how do we build, and not just in tech, but broadly speaking, right? How do we build pipelines of entrepreneurship? And I think in this instant, I think that we're missing the mark a lot because we are not looking at economic development as an engine for planning and growing cities. We've been in meetings a lot talking about affordable housing, which is really, really big in Durham right now, right? And we have the tendency to start to focus on the symptoms, right? As to what's happening and not really do a root cause analysis and figure out how do we solve this root problem, right? People are being pushed out of certain areas of Durham, not because of the affordability issue, but because of an economic development issue. But we're not having these conversations. And to a degree, we're still talking about individual access, giving individual companies, 30%, 40%, whatever those asks are, right? But I think until we start to do a root analysis to figure out how do we build a whole entire system, a whole entire pipeline of entrepreneurs across the board, not just real estate, life science, tech, but across the board, how do we do that and how do we invest in that money-wise? I think we're missing a lot of that, what's happening there. And I think we've missed a lot in this current cycle, so hopefully we'll see some different things moving forward. Questions? Yes.
Now, you just answered part of my question. I wanted to ask the young lady who's second on my right. Yep, real estate. You mentioned ecosystems, and you mentioned that you all are developing an ecosystem. How did you do that?
Initially, it started by looking around and realizing that there wasn't one there for my industry, for people that look like me. And I looked at my network of mentors whom I respect, and I realized that we were scattered, and it just needed to be pulled together. And it started with conversations. It started with, hey, what do you need in order for your business to be more successful? And those conversations drilled down to, information, access to capital, resources, and all those things that if we came together, we could figure out together to the benefit of everyone at the table.
Okay, so now I want to ask a second question. Didn't someone mention that they're from the Chamber of Commerce at the beginning?
Correct, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so anyway, you know what I'm talking about, the ecosystem being a key to dollar turnover in the community and so forth, and that will help us to build wealth. So thank you very much for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Let's see another question go up.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
We're at a conference. It's called Capital Matters. And I know that there's sometimes where it's difficult to get capital. And have you ever been in a position where you've had to say no to capital? Whether it's when you're looking at the term sheet, whether it's the person themselves, or just a gut feeling where you just had to say, thanks, I really do need the money, but no thanks, because I don't need X.
I was in a situation for, I own about an acre of land adjacent to downtown, so it's probably walking distance from here, and have owned it for several years. And previously I thought, oh, I might be able to put maybe half a dozen homes on here, but wasn't super excited about it because they would have had, in order to make the numbers work, they would have had to kind of be McMansions, and and thinking about the community, that wasn't really the product that I wanted to put on the ground. But in trying to move forward with the project, I did speak with commercial lenders, and I remember the lender that was receptive to it, that I ended up saying yes to the financing to, was a local bank here, but the initial term sheet wasn't going to work. What was nice, though, again, about smaller and local banks is that you can get to the higher-ups sometimes to have those conversations that are meaningful, that can make a project work. So while the response was no but thank you to the initial offer, it opened up a conversation about, well, what needs to be tweaked? And they finally admitted, you know what, we've been using these terms just in general as our template, but we understand that your project is a little bit unique, so let's figure out how to make trade-offs so that it can be a win-win. And we were able to move forward with that because there was flexibility. Funny thing was, there was so much else going on in business that project had to sort of halt and wait, which is actually a good thing, because expanding housing choices now, I thought I could put 6 properties on it, and that may have tripled now depending on how the spacing works out, which I'm excited about, because then those properties have to be smaller, which means they will inherently be more affordable for the folks in the community. So I'm excited about that. But that means I have to go back and redo the financing, and I don't know what that's going to look like, because it's going to involve accessory dwelling units, which are not normally seen on appraisals, and appraisals determine your financing. So I have a challenge ahead of myself in order to make this work, and make this work in the way that I want to see it work, and trying to get to a point where I can now get another term sheet that can make that project move forward. So it was sort of a no, but it was a no, but can we talk about it? And it turned into a yes. Because all money is not necessarily good money, and you have to look at the short term of what your needs are, but you also have to look long term at how it's going to impact the project that you're trying to do.
I think for me, I've turned down a lot of the equity inquiring, because if you know childcare, it's expensive. And so on the other turn, it is a very lucrative business. But when you get into it for the purpose of the money, when you have investors, it changes the dynamic of who you serve and how you can serve them. So I've had to say no to some investors because the intent would be me driving the bottom line constantly, and the programming and the reinvestment into teachers that I want to be able to create becomes an issue. And then some of my lenders have given me, lending, and I don't say no to anyone until I can get all the yeses that I need, that I can close and then say no, thank you. But that sits there's some people who have very high rates, and you've got to make a decision to write those into your financials and make sure that you can afford them. And if you can't, to be able to say boldly no.
Yeah.
I have stories of clients, some of them that said yes and should have said no. And that's something that happens. I have one of my very good friends. He just opened a restaurant, a wing restaurant, and the partner that was one of his friends that he selected put up money, and retail restaurant margins are very low, So within 30 days, this guy's trying to take money out, like, where's the profit? I'm laughing, I'm like, what are you talking about, the profit? So, and it affects, and unfortunately, my friend is working there 24/7, this guy, he works in real estate. He's a VP at a builder, so you know he's making money, but he's really calling like, hey, where are the profits? Someone's stealing and all that, and you have that dynamic. So I guess that's unrealistic expectations. So that's another variable. You know, when people deal with money from private sources as well, like people. I mean, I can't say what I usually say. The only place he could get that kind of money, but I'm like, this is not that. You know, you getting 16 cents on each dollar. You know, how are you going to pull the money out and then you'll suffocate the business? And so you had to, be careful. And because once you get started, then people start wanting to give you money. Oh yeah, I want in. And you have to be patient. You need patient money most times when you're starting. You need patient, not. I mean, some people want Madoff returns, and it's not going to happen. So that's my story on it. Yeah, not too many people offer me money for my business, but that's cool.
There's a level of discretion that I'll need to maintain, but I'll just say I think like some entrepreneurs have dealt with investors that have made promises that have not come through, and I went through that with my deal, and I'll just say I think it's one of those memorable times when you're just like, man, I'm about to lose a lot of money, but then I think that also just is when that creativity kicks in, and that's when you're more, I think, transparent in terms of what it is that you need, with the people who are willing to do the deal with you. I think also just making it very clear, this is my start, and for me, with this particular transaction, I chose an acquisition, intentionally. This is me making a career transition and wanting people to take a chance with me in terms of what I'm looking at. But the reality was, being able to pitch to them something that's cash flowing, it was just a little bit of an easier transition to build a relationship and then to move on, to more development or redevelopment projects. So that was really the strategy behind it for me. I also had to learn very quickly about just overall investment appetite. And so, early on, you find out the people who said, hey, this is more passive investment, not really what I'm looking for. But when you find a really great renovation, project, that's where, I'll likely be the partner. But yeah, faced with similar challenges, getting through the no's. I think it was also a period of maturing, in a really short period of time. And so when I got the no, I tell people it's staying in the conversation long enough to hear what is the yes, right? And so that's where I say no to this because it's more of a passive investment. But when you give me something that has more of an upside to it, like a renovation project, that's my yes. Or I'm telling you no, but guess what? I'm passing you on to my network. And so to me, that was the maturity, in terms of staying in it, the conversation long enough to be able to get, to that point. So, but I also find it fun, right? Like if you can't handle those no's, this is not the space for you to be in, right? And so, like I said, to me, that's the drive, is that I get to continue to be creative, and makes for a good story, I guess. So, yeah.
Perfect. Well, that's our time, folks. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so it's 4:45 after. I want to thank the audience for your engagement, for your questions. Certainly thank you to our panelists for your time and for your openness. We'll be around, and feel free to ask us some questions as we close right now, but thank you so much.